The Ask Dr. Pickel show, where we help people find answers for their chronic health issues, chronic health conditions. All right, so today we're going to dive right in with a genetic issue, a real common one that probably many of you have heard of. It's called MTHFR. What does that mean? Methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase. So that ASE on the end of reductase means it's an enzyme. So that's what our genes do, is they make these enzymes. And these enzymes are very important because what do enzymes do? They break things down, they cleave things, they make it so our body can manufacture things from other things. So pretty darn important that the gene is working properly. Now the other thing to understand with genes is, or in what we call epigenetics, is that genes don't work in isolation. Genes work with other genes. So when a patient comes to me, and we see this a lot where patients will come in and they'll say, Dr. Pickel, my other doctor diagnosed me with MTHFR. I have a genetic issue. This may be a big part of my problem. They told me this or they told me that this could happen, that could happen. Maybe I'm not a good detoxifier, all these things. So let's clarify this a little with this video and talk more about MTHFR, because again, this gene does not work in isolation. It works with other genes that are also involved in methylation. In fact, a lot of these genes kind of work together. Now, MTHFR is pretty important on my list of the top 60 genes, but it's not number one. It's really more like number 10 or plus. So it's important. The thing to understand with this gene, too, is that it is involved in actually activating folate. So folate, which many of you may know that it is folic acid, which is the synthetic form of folate, is pretty darn important in our body. Folate is used in many things in our body, many functions, chemical reactions that go on our body, pretty darn important. But it's especially important in its utilization to turn what's called methionine into homocysteine, which homocysteine, I'm going to talk about more, can be at high levels an inflammatory part of a protein. And again, we need it because we use it to manufacture other things, but if it goes too high, it can be a problem. Actually, even if it goes too low, it can be a problem. So when people have a MTHFR genetic SNP, what we call a single nucleotide polymorphism, meaning their gene, due to some reason, is not activating folate. So let's say I get some folate. Let's say I take a folate pill, just basic folate. It's not methylated. I take it, or some folic acid, which will actually make the whole problem worse because it's a synthetic folate. Take that, and then my body says, hey, there's some folate. Okay, we'd love to use that folate, but we have to activate it. We've got to put something on it. We've got to, what we call, methylate it to turn it on so the body can actually use it. Otherwise, it just floats around and nothing happens. So if we can't turn it on, if you have this genetic issue, you can't turn on the folate to actually make it into this usable form, which that usable form is what allows it to do all the things it does. So if this occurs, yeah, certain things are going to go wrong in the body. One of those is that your homocysteine levels can go up. Now, homocysteine, probably the most research that's done with that is done with cardiovascular disease, building up plaque in the arteries, inflammation of your arteries and blood vessels. The homocysteine is kind of goes in there and just starts to tear up the walls of the arteries, and so you add more cholesterol in to repair it, and it just starts to build a plaque. So we don't want that. But also homocysteine can be a marker for inflammation in a lot of areas of the body too. So it is pretty darn important. Now, as we look at the slide here, we'll see what it's really important for. It's important, like we talked about, it turns folate into that activated form, and this helps your body to turn homocysteine into S-adenosylmethionine, SAM, which is used just in about everything. I mean, across our body, SAM, S-adenosylmethionine, is used for it's used in almost more functions than anything else in our body. So pretty darn important. And then also, what happens with these MTHFR issues? This causes a backup of this homocysteine, which is Bad news. So here's a whole list of problems that can go on if this gene isn't working. Actually, yeah, this is some pretty bad stuff. Strokes, heart disease, blood pressure issues, migraines, birth defects. Now, one way you can look at, hey, is my methylation working? Am I methylating folate? Is you can actually do a blood test, a pretty easy blood test to check your homocysteine levels. If those homocysteine levels are high, yeah, you may have a folate issue, either a folate deficiency or a folate methylation issue or some other issue. There's actually quite a few things that can increase homocysteine. It's not just this. So there are definitely other factors, and a lot of them relate to B vitamins like B12, B6, B2. So definitely some other issues, even beyond that, that can increase this folate or increase homocysteine, which is a part of inflammation. So a lot of times when I see that homocysteine level high on your blood, I'll say, oh, we've got inflammation. Now we got to find out what it is. Now the other side of the story too is that, yeah, you could check your blood folate levels, but that doesn't really mean a lot because that can fluctuate through the day. And also that doesn't tell us how much your cells are utilizing, how much is in the cell. We're only seeing what's floating in your bloodstream. So you could take a bunch of folate, your levels could increase in your bloodstream, but is it getting used? Is it getting methylated, activated, and used by your system? Really hard to know with that. So you can also test this gene. There's many ways to look and test your genes. You know, a lot of your basic labs, you can just run this MTHFR gene at a typical lab, or you can go into different companies and they will run tests of all your genes, which can be a lot more, I feel, cost effective too, to look at multiple genes, and also is going to give you more information because, again, like I said, it's never just this gene. There's many genes that work in tandem with this, other ones that we have to look at. I would say MTHFR, one of them, MTRR, BHMT1, MAT1A, AHCY, CBS. These are different genes that can also be heavily involved in methylation and cysteine. So it is looking at, and then looking at all the genes around that too, which are just as important also. So then, when we look at this too, what do you do? What do you do if you have this issue? Well, number one, you take methylated folate. You can buy this. It'll say folate as it'll say MTHF, or it'll say 5-MTHF. And again, this is what you take, as opposed to taking folic acid. A long time ago they used to tell women, oh, take folic acid, especially if you're pregnant, because it can prevent birth defects. Well, yeah, you definitely need folate to help prevent birth defects, but not folic acid. Actually, if you saturate your system with folic acid, it actually can make your folate issue worse, because the body can't utilize it properly, and it kind of jams up the receptors for the folate that you need. The other way to get, and that's what I kind of wrote there, this synthetic causes a folate deficiency. Also, how can you get folate? Dark green leafy vegetables. That's one of your best sources. And then you really, if you're eating plenty of those, you probably don't have a problem. You may not even need to supplement, because the thing is if you're eating a lot of those, your body's going to be able to readily utilize that form, get exactly what it needs. You won't get too much or not enough. So that is probably one of the best ones. And then if you have these other genetic issues, like I talked about, MTR, MTRR, MAT, yeah, you take folate, you could make yourself worse. Because some people say, oh gosh, I got an MTHFR issue. My doctor told me to take methylated folate. I took it, felt horrible. You've got an issue with these other genes. So we've got to look at those and support those, or otherwise your folate issue has now become a bigger issue that needs to be looked at and controlled. And again, like I said, you can look at your blood homocysteine tests, and also things that keep folate from working properly or inhibit its production or its activation. Caffeine's a big one I see in a lot of people. Green tea can actually work against you. Green tea is a great antioxidant, has great properties, but yeah, it can affect this. And then folic acid, which I talked about. All right, well, I hope everybody got some great information on MTHFR, and I want to talk about more genes in the future as we go. And I hope everybody enjoyed this video today, and hopefully you don't have an MTHFR issue, and if you do, we probably need to figure it out. All right, have a wonderful day, and God bless.